Hello, Malcolm here, and welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tips, and this is episode 260, and our title today is Jesus is Gonna Fix It. Or is he? Is he? Is he gonna fix everything? And the reason I have this title, which by the way is from a song I really like, Jesus is Gonna Fix It, of course, that line continues with after a while. And that while might be in our lifetime and it might not be. I really like that song. Actually, if you want to listen to a good version of it, I'm including a link to a YouTube video of a person, Matt Genez, I don't know how you pronounce that, doing it right in a rather good way. But today what I want to talk about is whether sometimes in our preaching and teaching, we give the impression Jesus is going to fix it. Whether even those of us who don't believe in the health and wealth gospel approach subtly sometimes buy into it or allow our congregations to think that we buy into it by preaching and teaching how-to lessons. And I think this is significant for lots of different reasons. And it's on my mind in particular because I'm reading a really interesting book as part of my course called Christian Worship and Technological Change. It's by Susan J. White, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, she's writing from a very much North American perspective. So for my cousins over the pond, she's writing from your perspective, but I do think it affects most of the Western world and perhaps even beyond. She writes about the fact that, so let's take a little tour here of some ideas and then come back to the specifics of the how-to sermons. She writes about the fact that we are living in a very media-saturated world today. I don't think any of us could deny that. And she wonders whether media and the approach of media to issues is influencing our congregational worship, our preaching and teaching as well, more than we might realize. Because out there in this media-saturated world, what we have is competing authorities, competing for our trust, competing for our money, competing for our loyalty, whether it's political or what we're going to buy or what we're going to invest in or who we're going to trust to give us advice about the best way to, I don't know, certain medicines to take, nutrition, our posture, all this kind of stuff's on YouTube. Who are we going to trust for these things? We have these competing authorities claiming that they can make our lives better, they can fix things for us. And I wonder whether that's influencing some of the ways we do worship more than we might notice. Out there we have all these influencers and influencers telling us what is good, what is healthy, what is effective, and given what we see of their lives, the photographs they post, the videos they put up, well, like I'm putting one up here, it looks like perhaps they are healthy, that they have found an effective way to do things, that they are doing it in a good way. I'm talking here about how church is done, especially worship. And of course, we have now an awful lot of online church services being broadcast, the traditional tele-evangelism events, as well as other big services being broadcast. And what we find there is we have people who are standing up to say, essentially, this is the way to do church. And doesn't it look good? And of course, on television and on YouTube, it looks good. I watched a megachurch service recently. It was impressive. And in discussion with some of my fellow students, we explored the idea that this is a made-for-television event. It looks amazing. And these broadcast services have led to greater predictability in worship. They have a standardization because on television, standardization is everything. You find a formula that the audience like and you stick with it. Viewers then know what to expect and to trust. Megachurches have a lot in common, but in particular, two things. One is a strong authoritarian leadership. This is the way it is done. And secondly, predictability. Usually a predictable pattern for worship. High technical standards, of course, is what we tend to see. Lighting, PA, sound, production is all amazing. Predictability, as we talked about. The services are easy to follow. We know what's happening and when it's happening. It's not subtle, and it's not unpredictable, and it's not organic. High standards, predictability, easy to follow, clear, strong leadership. This is what is happening, and this is what to do if you want to have a good relationship with God, and so on. Now, of course, these things aren't anything new. We can look back through Christian history and see some similar trends. But perhaps these ideas are coming at us more forcefully now, and they're more pervasive because of the media saturation that we have. And in a sense, media has tried to convince us that there's a fix for everything. Advertising has changed. When advertising first came onto radio and in television back in the day, it was much more about the quality of the product rather than the consumer. Now it's about, we know what you consumers want and here's what you want, whether it's good for you or not. And I wonder if this has influenced the people in our congregations and us as leaders who preach and teach and how we think about worship and how we think about what we preach on. Is our worship attempting to solve a problem, heal an ill, answer a question? And those things in themselves are not problematic, but if that's our focus, is that the right focus? Or is that more the outcome, that people find solutions, they find healing, they find an answer, but it comes out of the worship rather than it's the focus of the worship? What's the difference there? I wonder what you think about the balance there as to which is the right balance or how to get a balance, or perhaps a blend might be a better way of looking at it, even than a balance. And I wonder if at times we're in danger of providing worship and preaching and teaching that at least gives the impression that it's about fixing people quickly, fixing people easily, fixing people effectively without a great deal of effort. As she writes in her book on page 118, White says, for most participants, she's talking about a congregational gathering, for most participants, worship is judged by its ability to uplift, inspire, and console. Uplift, inspire, console. Those are not bad outcomes, but are those meant to be our aims in conducting and organizing and planning congregational worship and our preaching and our teaching? I wonder whether, instead, our aim should be the uplifting of God, the revealing of God, the showing us of God as Father, Son, and Spirit. And perhaps then people may find some uplift, some inspiration, some consolation that they need. Finally, let's just talk briefly here about how I think it might have affected our preaching and teaching. So let me ask you this simple question. How many how-to lessons did Jesus teach? Can you think of any? How many of them were how to do this, how to overcome that? How many did he preach and teach? I can think of one in Matthew 6, where Jesus says in verse 9 of Matthew 6, this then is how you should pray. Okay, how you should pray. And he gives them what's commonly called the Lord's Prayer, of course. So there's an answer to my question. He did that, how you should pray. But what I would suggest is, it's not a formulaic thing. He's not saying, here is how you should pray, and that's all there is to say about prayer, and it is the formula you need to adhere to at all times and slavishly. That's not really the point, isn't it? Is you look through the prayer, you see it's about reshaping their understanding of the Father, our Father in the heavenlies. Hallowed be your name. And it's about the kingdom coming. And then it's about us and our formation, about us having the right priorities, the kingdom priorities, and being helped by God. And he goes on in the rest of the Sermon on the Mount to actually draw out a lot of what this means. So it's not a formulaic thing. And I think you'll struggle to find many other parts of the New Testament where Jesus tells them, this is how you do this, that, and the other. Now, it's not that Jesus' teachings were not practical. They certainly were very applicable and relevant. But most of his teaching was focused on helping people to understand who he was, who God the Father was, who the Holy Spirit is, and what he was going to come and do, and about how to orient their hearts and minds to the kingdom and what the kingdom means. And then they would find the other things that they certainly needed. Now, I've taught plenty of how-to lessons, but what I've tried to do recently, over the last, especially one I did more recently, was to help people to understand that as we talk about how-to, and the recent lesson was how to hear from God, how to hear God, how to listen to God. But actually the lesson was really about what's the right attitude for us to take, because there aren't any boxes to tick or buttons to push or levers to pull to be able to hear from God. It is really about an attitude. We talked about Samuel, and really it was Samuel's attitude that enabled him to have that listening relationship with God. It's about the attitude. It's about the heart. So it seems to me a how-to lesson is okay. It's appropriate in certain circumstances, but it must be really about the development of Christian character. I find preparing a how-to lesson helps me clarify what I'm trying to say, But then I must be careful not to make it formulaic. But it's about God, Father, Son, Spirit, and it's about the development of Christian character in those that are listening with God as the focus. So what do you think about this? Do you think that the media, advertising, the examples of amazing church services on YouTube and television and such like, are they influencing our understanding of what God's standards are, of what really matters when we preach and teach? And are we giving our congregations the impression that Jesus is going to fix it? And he's going to fix it if you take these 3 steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, bingo, Jesus is going to fix it. And you know what? He's going to fix it today or possibly tomorrow. When in fact, I think Jesus is going to fix everything. But isn't he going to fix it after a while, in his time? And in the meantime, aren't we to see the trials that we're undergoing as being ways to develop Christian character? And as we learn spiritual disciplines, we learn more how to be more like him, how to grow into him, and how to be kingdom people that take the kingdom out into this lost, dark, needy world. Now, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree and you think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, and you could tell me that. That's totally fine. But I would like to know what you think, because this and things connected with it are very much on my mind with the course I'm doing, and any feedback you give me might find its way into my essay that's due in about a month from now. So perhaps you can help me with that. So I do pray and hope Jesus fixes it for you, but I pray you and I will have the patience to let him fix it in his way and in his time. Until the next time, I hope you have a terrific Tuesday and a wonderful week. Take care. God bless.